From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Welcome back, everyone. It's nice to see friendly faces as always, and family members, adoring friends. This is spring, and spring always means that we're saying goodbye to Corcoran interns. And so today is the first of those talks. This is a reminder that next Thursday there'll be another talk. But today is for Nama and her discussion of digressional wanderings. I want to talk a little bit about how this happened, not to take from her talk, but to talk about the role of the library in terms of connecting students in the art of the book to the actual object and beyond. Because I think in terms of Nama's case, it started with a dog and pony show here in the division where a book made out of string went flying by. And when she signed up for her internship, one of the first books we pulled out was, in fact, book 91, which will play heavily in this conversation, or play somewhat in this conversation today. So it's that hook that brings the student to a book, and the book to an idea, and then the idea back to the books. That's so exciting about these kinds of internships. Not only do they get to play in our fabulous collections, they're mine, in my fabulous collection. But they also begin to bring ideas to them that the rest of us don't have a chance to see. So for us here, it's a great learning experience to listen to Julia and Nama talk about the books that they're looking at and the questions they're asking and their own insights into the techniques that they know and understand and the dialogue that grows out of that. Ultimately, that gets honed down to a presentation, which you're going to hear today, which I'm very much looking forward to. So I want to say thank you for coming. Thank you, Corcoran, for giving us such wonderful interns. Nama.
In Umberto Eco's book, The Name of the Rose, a book about an intellectual mystery combining Eco's areas of interest, such as semiotics, biblical analysis, medieval studies, and literary theory, Brother William of Baskerville, who was called to investigate a murder at the monastery, tells his young assistant, add of milk. In the face of some inexplicable facts, you must try to imagine many general laws whose connection with your facts escapes you. Then, suddenly, in the unexpected connection of a result, in a specific situation, and one of those laws, you perceive a line of reasoning that seems more convincing than the others. You try applying it to all similar cases, to use it for making predictions, and you discover that your intuition was right. But until you reach the end, you will never know which predicates to introduce into your reasoning and which to omit. And this is what I'm doing now. I line up so many disjointed elements, and I venture some hypotheses. As an artist, an art and a book student, I'm interested in venturing hypotheses. More than a month into my internship at the Library of Congress, while pondering different lines of reasoning, all of a sudden, I had this eureka moment. Actually, it was on the metro on my way back home from the library, in which one general law, one hypothesis, seemed more convincing than the others. Digressions. A temporal departure from the main subject. Not seldom, digressions are escorted with an apology. Moving away from an expected linear path suggests a sense of error. Interestingly, the obsolete meaning of the word error refers to the act of wandering. Thus, the who digresses away from the path, who wanders his way, is perceived as one who errs. This talk calls into question this affinity between digression and error and suggests that the digression is a base for potential opportunities, risks, experiments, innovations, plays, contradictions, and further to the creation of a new entity which gives a fuller representation of an experience. Digression, then, is not an interruption, but a story-generating mechanism. Digressions can be shaped in varied ways. The further the digression goes, the larger its formal disconnection from the text becomes. There are the digressions which derive from the story and are expected to return to the forward linear movement of the plot, to the point they left. And there are the ones that become an alternative mode of the narrative, ones that are not end-oriented, not bound up with a desire for resolution or closure, and not predicated on the intentional succession of events. These digressions have no formal connection to the story they interrupt. They neither explain it nor derive from events depicted in a story. They are free to curve out their own path, own space, no longer obliged to the narrative from which they digress, free themselves from subordination, stick to their own digressional path without looking back. Yet, these are the digressions that assume the higher extent of involvement and participation of the readers. The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy, Gentleman, by Laurence Sterne. Between the years 1759 to 1767, Laurence Sterne, a clergyman of one of the congregation in Yorkshire, England, delineated a time-based digressional path. The book, The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy, Gentleman. It was a time of enlightenment in which structure, reasoning, and linearity were the dominant tools through which the world had been observed. And indeed, many opinions had Tristram Shandy, and the linearity of time and any other linear norm were not an appropriate tool to lead his story. Tristram Shandy is a 9 small-volume novel about the life of Tristram Shandy. But then, nothing is simply explained in this novel. There are so many digressions and detours that Tristram is born in Volume 3 while he was conceived on the first page of Volume 1. This was the night that predicated the unfortunate course of his life. As Tristram tells, I wish either my father or my mother, or indeed both of them, as they were in duty both equally bound to it, had minded what they were about when they begot me. Tristram Shandy was a postmodern classic before there was a modernism to be post about. And indeed, Laurence Sterne's writing was a precursor of writers such as James Joyce, Virginia Woolf, and Jorge Luis Borges. The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy is a delightful idiosyncratic play through which the readers are given the opportunity to unfold, underpin, become involved, and judge the narrative. This cross-time digressional game has been directed and shaped by a system of hyphens, dashes varying in length, asterisks, blank and black pages, spacing, and margins. Sterne leaves a visual evidence for doubt by writing and deleting a sentence and leaving the crossing out completely visual. He omits chapter only to insert them again several pages later, and insert marble pages, which traditionally marks the boundaries of the text in an unexpected places through the book. Tristram Shandy has no central narrative. It is a composition of digressions. Sterne is very well aware of the constant flow of ideas in the mind, and this probably led him to think that it was unnatural for his narrator's mind to dwell for long on one subject. The revelation, then, of ideas and action is done in such an arbitrary way that the digressions turn to be the linearity of the text. Tristram Shandy is so full of digression that if we were to remove them, the book would cease to exist, As Laurence Sterne wrote, digression, incontestably, are the sunshine. They are the life, the soul of reading. Take them out of this book, Tristram Shandy, for instance, you might as well take the book along with them. Laurence Sterne needs the participation of the readers to be allowed to digress, since a digression from a linear text is marked by stronger presence of both the narrator and the reader. Thus, for Sterne to speak of a digression, he must have assumed that the readers had understood the role in these digressions. Sterne's digressions, then, are the result of his great concern for his audience. He had produced the digressions to fulfill his different communicative obligations to his readers, to explain, to instruct, to amuse. He parodies, quotes, repeats. He is self-conscious, he is self-reflexive. The end result of these digressions, hence, is an endeavor to conceal and accommodate them into an entirely new entity with no intention of returning to its point of departure. And the readers who are looking for a grammatical hierarchy, clean genre, and form an absolute ending will not find their way. Laurence Sterne is very well aware of his inability, or shall we say unwillingness, to follow a linear path. Here is Sterne's delineation of this inability. I am now beginning to get fairly into my work, Sterne writes, and by the help of a vegetable diet with a few of the cold seeds, I make no doubt, but I shall be able to go on with my Uncle Toby's story and my own in a tolerable straight line. Now, these were the 4 lines I moved in through my first, second, third, and fourth volumes. In the 5th volume, I have been very good. The precise line I have described in it begins this. The life and opinions of Tristram Shandy Gentleman is a game in which all the participants can be in several places at once and do several things at once. It is a game that omits hierarchy, space, and linearity. It is a time-based semiotic system within itself, excluding syntax hierarchy. It is a subject, verbs, and the object. It is a signifier and the signified, the icon, the symbol, and the index. It is a challenge for the boundaries of a digression. In the following works, I would like to suggest that a digression shapes the connection between the story and the reader. The digression is a common thread that leads and shapes the way from Tristram Shandy, one of the early precedents to artist books, to contemporary artist books. The digression carries the memory of a text, is bound to the codex form and to the history of a book. It is a digression that carves out the development and shaping of a new entity, which explores, one that could stand on its own. Indeed, an artist book is an entity which explores the boundaries of a digression, not anymore a minimal detour, but intentional movement, which doesn't aim to return to the straight line. Digression assures an eternal state of becoming rather than achieving an ending. Digression keeps the narrative in a state of becoming. Still and all does not neglect its origin, since throughout the history of the civilization, books have functioned as a cultural emblem. It is therefore the awareness to the origin of the book that allows the digression. A Humament by Tom Phillips, 1980. Tom Phillips is an artist whose work is expressed through a large number of formats, and this can be greatly seen in his work, A Humament. A Humament is a radical digression from the Victorian novel A Human Document by W.H. Mellock from 1892. Tom Phillips' choice of this novel was purely coincidental, since Phillips made a rule that the first coherent book he could find for 3d would serve, and so he found his 3-penny novel in a junk shop on Peckham Rise, South London. Phillips' treatment and alteration of each page of the novel is done in such a way that only select clusters and rivers of the original text are still visible. A humament is a comprehensive artwork, and the surface of it, the Victorian novel, is part of it. Phillips employs in his work multiple genres, discourses, and visual techniques. He uses techniques such as painting, collage, and cut-ups, and wide ranges of allusions to the 20th century art history, such as abstract expressionism, constructivism, and pointillism. He also alludes to the 15th century Venetian book, Hypnerotomachia Polyphily, which is the most celebrated illustrated printed book of the Italian Renaissance. However, this is not to impose any direct affinity in the structure, but to show that Phillips is bound to the history of the codex form and to the tradition of interaction between text and image. Linear reading is impossible in a humament, since not only Phillips digresses from the original story, the surface, but he also offers the reader new multiple paths from which the readers need to choose. Additionally, Phillips continues breaking the hierarchy of reading of left-right, top-down. Words are transformed into fragments and even broken into individual letters or phonemes. Hence, Phillips endlessly continues digressing, and not only from the physical pages of Mallock's books, but from any semantic meaning as well. It is the reader, then, who needs to participate in the process of linking. Therefore, the result is that no one discourse, no one element is privileged over the other. There is no hierarchy in the interaction between the core text and the new digressional text Phillips creates. None is superior over the other, none is inferior to the other. There is no inferiority in a digression. Most pages in a humament contain at least one geometrical shape. They are framed with a strong outline to draw the attention to the digression and to mimic the frame of a painting or window. Thus, secluded from the core text, the digression maintains its autonomy and uniqueness. The digression tends to flow outside of its given space and time, and Phillips retains it to the frame of a book. After all, it is the book and the text on it which attribute the meaning of these digressions. A humament, hence, is a coexistence of distinct varieties, the linear and the digressional, within a single page, and one cannot be read a part of the other. Sam Winston is a London-based writer and artist who creates a hybrid of text, design, and art. Visual language, as Winston states, speak volumes long before any words have been read. A dictionary story stemmed from this hybrid love in 2006. Winston's dictionary is a delightful play with the psychological and physical nature of a digression, nested in an accordion structure, a structure of potentially an endless fold that allows and supports digressions. The words Winston uses are constricted in columns alongside the folds of the accordion. These words are both the words of the dictionary and a story in itself. Their definitions are aligned on the other side of the folds, visible to the readers only when they digress from the word and turn the page, challenging the linear nature of a dictionary in which a linear line leads from the word to its definition. Here in Winston Dictionary, you have to turn the page, you have to digress to find its definition. Yet, even the definitions are not definite as in a dictionary, but more of digressional doubts. Along the way, there are constant and growing interruptions, and the independent units of digressions become units of narratives in themselves. The type begins to change as letters drop, jump, and tumble. The columns of data collapse into themselves and spill across the page. At this point, neither Winston nor the reader are any more obliged to the continuing columns alongside the folds of the accordion. The shape of the digressions, their flow, their independence takes the place of the linear narrative, and the search for any narrative flow becomes secondary. Breaking the genre of a dictionary, Winston and the readers embrace the failure of any linearity and delightfully flow with the stream of the digressions, stepping in and out of time, following the digressions. This web of digressions and the interconnections among them create a gestalt in which the sum of the digressions is even greater than the narrative of a dictionary. Book 91, also known as a string book, was created by the book artist Keith Smith in 1982 and is perhaps one of the seminal works of the artist books movement. It is also somewhat different from Smith's other works. Book 91 is a digression from a linear narrative. It explores the boundaries of a digression, yet does not neglect the origin use of its surface. It is bound to the physical form of a book, bound to the history of the book, bound to its memory. Along the way, when the readers browse through the book, curves the way with the strings, there is a sense of a tension between the memory of the book and its new artistic purpose. The readers who expect to be led after a linear narrative find themselves following an unexpected digression. There is no main narrative or plot. The readers are the ones who oblige to supply and unfold it. The string are digressions of certain feelings and psychological experiences, which are not accommodated in words. Multiple continuous lengths of string weave their way through complex patterns of holes and knots, curve out digressions. Yet, the reader, take an interlude, hastily look back to follow the digression, hang onto the string to see what path he was tracking, what course of realization he was fulfilling, understanding this is not a regular consumption of a book. There is no plot or narrative to follow. You, the reader, lack the security a linear narrative would have given you, yet driven forward, following the string. Writing in this book is a fictive action, since there is no visual evidence to previous digressions. There are no physical marks on the page. Previous digressions cannot be read. They had left no marks but onto the memory of the book. Each time the book is opened and the page is turned, new digressions, new experiences are formed and come into existence. The readers narrate and write themselves into the digressions, and the book, its form and strings, absorb those written digressions, preserve them in its memory. The strings need the surface of the book and its history in the same manner as the surface needs the string for the formation of the digression. The second encyclopedia of Telon. Jorge Luis Borges was an Argentinian short story writer whose stories were about dreams, labyrinths, libraries, mirrors, fictional writers, philosophy, and religion. Doubt was a sacred principle of his work. In the mid-1990s, a group of German graphic designers and book artists decided to give a shape in reality to the fictional encyclopedia, the first encyclopedia of Telon, a fictional encyclopedia about a fictional place, which appears in the fictional story Telon Okbar Orbis Tertius, which was written in Borges in 1941. If that is so, that fiction and doubt are the scaffolding of this story, some questions need to be asked. How can an encyclopedia describe and define a fictional world? How can a text, which is completely fictitious, be physically shaped in reality where it has no grasp? What other shapes can an encyclopedia take, considering an encyclopedia is a manifestation of linearity? If Talon, the fictional place that is depicted in Borges' story, has its own physical and metaphysical laws, how can those laws be reconstructed through the form of an encyclopedia? Additionally, in the story, it is revealed that Talon has its own grammar and no nouns. And so, how can an encyclopedia whose usage of noun is ingrained in its purpose depict a place with no nouns? These were among the questions the artists had to ask themselves prior to the physical realization of the encyclopedia. As happens sometimes, a substantial disagreement had arisen among the group, and it slipped into two groups. I will explore Farner and Farner's realizations, since I suggest they were the ones who employed a digressional approach. However, if any one of you is interested in seeing the other interpretation, then you can approach Mark. Thus, and as it seems, only a digressional approach was capable of depicting such a digression from what is familiar and linear. Digression is not an end-oriented, neither bound up with a desire for resolution or closure, nor predicated on the intentional succession of events. Farner and Farner's approach, hence, was to create an encyclopedia which is an independent entity, a unit in itself. And this was the reason for naming it the second encyclopedia and not the first, as in the story. An encyclopedia that would generate situation, activities, topics, and ideas, one in which the digressions are the main plot. The second encyclopedia of Talon by Farner and Farner consists of 5 green folders, ordered alphabetically and divided by dividers. The choice of green binders, as Farner remarks, is not only because they allow us the maximum amount of freedom for the entries we're producing in size and type, but also because no permanent order is dictated. Additionally, and out of the nature of a ring binder, I would add, the order of the entries in the encyclopedia can be changed, added, and reduced. What entries are in the encyclopedia? The 5 binders are an assembly of the varied aspects of life, digress from any structural and linear narrative of an encyclopedia, from memory to tea ceremony. Here are some of the entries. 11, technical report, memory, fish, surface form, of gravity and levity, the spirit, history of the madness kit, and so on. What is the entry, the history of the madness kit, about? It's a fantastic entry about a therapeutic game that was developed in an isolated island. On that island, although men and women spoke the same language, the meaning of the words was different. To ease the burden of that stress of miscommunication, the sufferer had to write a list of words which encapsulate his or her feelings and experiences. Then the words were cut up and stored in a small bag, and the sufferer had to take the words randomly out of the bag and meditate upon them. This meditation should have brought relief to the spirit and also the understanding of the potential danger of words. This list is as if life is created, not merely copied, Farner remarks, and the entries are glimpses into life, drops of life, ephemeral thoughts and ideas of a life that is created. They are events that strongly refer to the fact that Talon's grammar bears no nouns, and to the topics the story of Talon deals with, as well as Borges' stories in general. A repeated motif in this encyclopedia is an envelope. The majority of the information is kept in envelopes, attached to the dividers or to the binders on their own. And it is up to the reader to open the envelope, to unfold the content, to digress from what is already a digression. Hence, the digressional physicality of the second encyclopedia of Talon by Farner and Farner corresponds accurately, I would suggest, with the awry layers of fiction in the story and the encyclopedia. It is as if this encyclopedia, Farner notes, points forward to an imaginary moment in time. I have decided to end this talk with a work that does not exist anymore, and there is only one image of it. Unhappy Ready-Made by Marcel Duchamp. This work is perhaps the extremist case of a digression. It's the ultimate fulfillment of a digression. Marcel Duchamp is an artist who, at the early 1920s, had greatly expanded the boundaries of the art world. He was also the one who coined and brought into the art world the expression ready-made, a mass-produced object selected by an artist and displayed as a work of art. Marcel Duchamp created Unhappy Ready-Made in 1919 as a wedding gift for his sister Suzanne. The chosen piece for this work was a geometry book, Euclidean Geometry, the geometry which brought structure and logic into the world. Duchamp took this book from its original and natural context, and thus it can be read as a ready-made. Duchamp instructed his sister Suzanne to hang this geometry textbook from the balcony of her Paris apartment so that the knowledge in that book will be exposed to the test of the wind, sun, and rain, challenging the Euclidean geometry on its 2 and 3 dimensions, gets the facts of life, as Duchamp stated. Suzanne had carried out the instructions and hung out the book from her apartment's balcony for a certain period of time. This was a turning point from which the book started to digress from itself. Time and weather had taken their toll on Unhappy Ready-Made, and the book became worn out by the elements, absorbing while digressing the facts of life. The wind had to go through the book, Duchamp explained, choose its own problem, turn and tear out the pages. This is an infinite mode of a digression. The digression will never get there. As more as we analyzed the course of the digression, the more grains and fractals we find. The digression exists in an eternal state of becoming, infinitely deteriorating. It will never achieve an ending. Unhappy Ready-Made is a work that had started in a very definite voice, the voice that civilization had established to better define its world, yet turned into infinite fractals of a digression that carries the memory of the world. There is no conclusion in this work. It is sufficient to itself, a world in itself. There is no inscription of a boundary, no trace of a limit.
From the audience? I have one if you don't. But I'm saving it because it's really good. There you go.
Well, one of the things that crossed my mind when you were talking about digressions is an article that was in the Washington Post about how people are reading now with all the digital materials and reading the internet. And it almost seems like when you look at the internet, you're constantly digressing. You know, you see one thing while you link to it. You're constantly moving in different places that you never expected to go.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's not negative at all. I think you actually construct your own text, your own narrative.
Nama, how did you go about deciding what books you were going to include in this lecture?
Well, initially I was thinking to build my lecture on the perception of time, and I was thinking to start from Tristram Shandy, because Tristram Shandy is about time, and actually time is ingrained in digression. And I gathered some books, but as I said at the beginning of my talk, I think it was a month into my internship, that this eureka moment that this digressional hypothesis worked in, I would say, in a perfect narrative onto the books I gathered. And then I had to omit some of the books from my track because they, I thought they were not exactly digressional books.
Can you give us some examples?
Well, I had Dickinson, what is the name of the John Bervin's book? The Dickinson...
You mean where the punctuation?
Yes, yes. Dickinson...
It's a hand-embroidered book where Emily Dickinson's poetry is omitted, and the only thing that's there that's embroidered is her curious punctuation.
Punctuation, yeah. And also, I mean, I actually want to write about this. But I thought that this was, initially I thought this was a digression, but then when I kept pondering about that book, it seemed to me that one component of it, the punctuation, was elevated, so it wasn't exactly a digression.
Piece of information for everybody actually that the human document by Tom Phillips is now on display in Miami, Florida. There is a new museum, Perez Museum, and there is this fantastic collection of visual and concrete poetry owned by Dr. Sackner and his wife. And they have the original copy of Tom Phillips. I don't know whether, have you ever been there?
No.
Because it would be fantastic for you to go there. And if the exhibition will be on view until the end of, I think, August, but then it will be in their house because they are good friends of Tom Phillips and they collect him. So that would be really a treasure house for if you want to build on your research and go further. And also, I think everybody knows that it was a paperback of Tom Phillips' human document once, which you could buy for, I guess, $10 or something like that, because he had an exhibition in New York, and I actually got a copy of that. So these are things which can be popular.
Yes,
I'm wondering, thank you for your wonderful talk.
thank you.
I'm wondering if you were tempted to try to relate your work, your theme, to Rabelais or Gancho and Pantagruel, and if not, anything else that any other works in this genre that use lists, because it seems to me that maybe these comical lists, not serious lists, but comical long lists that amount to really nothing. They're way more detailed than is required. That they also function in a similar way to some of the digressions as being a kind of burlesque of rationality.
You know, digression had existed before Lawrence Stern, Tristram Shandy. It was just a Tristram Shandy is an extenuation of this. It's a revolution. This is why I chose this novel, and also because it's a very interesting connection between to the contemporary artist book. You know, when you display your angle, when you choose your hypothesis, obviously you eliminate other options that exist, and you choose it's a manipulative, obviously, angle, but you're the one to choose your own story. Where do you want your story to start and where to end, if it ends. So, you know, I could have chosen other writers, but it was, I perceived Tristram Shandy as a real revolution. It was a time of enlightenment, and I mean, he turned upside down all the rules of his era. and again, you know, he allows me to travel in time and to show the connection with contemporary artist books.
Thank you.
Are you a book artist yourself? Are you,
Yeah, I'm an artist, yes.
then how are you what are you taking out of this project?
Oh, this is an interesting question. I cannot, you know, answer you, any direct answer like that. I took specific component directly into my work, but I am fascinated. I'm fascinated by the fact that I can keep displaying angles onto the world and explore it and change my hypotheses, not necessarily eliminate the previous ones, but I think it's this internship and this talk it's part of my artistic doing, you know, the exploration of the world. That's it. Yes, Casey.
Thanks so much, Noah. I really loved the talk. I'll
Thank
have
you.
plenty to think about in the coming days. So I'm just, something that's kind of dovetailing on the question about Rabelais. As you were, especially at the beginning, I could have heard you talk only about Stern, and I would have been really happy. I was thinking about the connection between digression and transgression. I was thinking about Stern, like even the act of reading a novel in the 1760s is kind of a digression from daily life. In Stern's particular kind of digression, it often involves like a radical awareness of the materiality of reading itself in a book form. And could you speak about the politics of that in some ways? I mean, I don't know if that's too oblique a question, but other than the wonderful kind of whimsical nature of Stern and his
Yes.
convoluted, you know, digressions in all kinds of different ways.
Yes. Yes, this is also something I'm very interested about, and I don't know if you recall, Carrie, but the paper I wrote to your seminar dealt with the connection between the function of the book and its physicality. And, well, I didn't bring Tristram Shandy, but I brought examples from the Book of Hours, for example. There are examples through the history. I find it very interesting the affinity, and I would say even the obligation of artist books to the codex form, and the work of art, the outcome of the book, the artist book, is contains so many layers of not only the content in the book, but also the history of the codex form, the history of the book, the memory. It's all absorbed in the book. This is why I think the book artists are so rich. They always travel in time. They always have this reference. I mean, every work of art has its own references to the outside world, but there is something very special in artist books that carry in a very noticeable way, both physically and emotionally and psychologically, this memory of the history of the world, of the history of civilization, of the history of the codex form, the physicality of the codex form in it. So when you look at the book, you see these array of layers of history.
Well, it also kind of willed, almost a clarion call. You know, this isn't left to right, up to down.
True.
That, you know, what the book form can do is not just linear text block, so to speak.
Yes. And I think also, you know, when you, I'm almost positive that when people read Tristram Shandy, it was either they looked in a different way on the world when they put the book aside, or at least something was changed. I mean, you have to look in a different way at your world. I mean, for example, when I leave the library, all my world is digressional. So, so, yes, Julie.
But this creates a kind of a, I don't know if it's a meta point, but perhaps an interesting point for further thought or research for you, because if you are going in Tristram Shandy or any other one of these books, if you are going exactly where that author is leading you, then is it really a digression? Because they're taking you there, that's where they want you to go. And so then when does the digression begin? Is it when you're on the metro home from the library going, you know, that's it? Because have you really digressed if you're going where the author is leading you? So I don't know, just kind of.
Yeah, no, this is very interesting. And as I said, you know, there is something manipulative in this digressional acting. And even my talk was linear. I had, so we play with digressions in our own linear limitation. Maybe we want to be digressional more than we are. Maybe we're more linear, more conservative than.
Right, or maybe the impact comes after, because as you said, at the time when you read the book,
yes,
you know, afterward you think,
yes,
gosh, the narrative didn't have to be
yes, because I, to some extent, even if it's a small extent, I do think that there is affinity between the experience we have when we go through a digressional book to the world we live in. We do bring, it's another layer to our perception of our life.
Do you want to go? Go ahead.
So, as you know, I'm kind of interested in the time things. I also caught on to what you're talking about with the envelopes and the fact that
With that, sorry?
the envelopes
in
that version,
Mm-hmm.
which was so completely different than the other version because you have to stop, you have to take things out. There's the physical act of unfolding. In that sense, I think that book is different than a lot of other things, but I am liking the idea that in the Tristram Shandy books, they don't quite have things that unfold and do things, but they make your eyes unfold and do things. So when you were choosing these, did you do this? Which ones did you like the best when you were looking for the envelopes? Were there specific ones that you found more fascinating than others that led you into some of the digressions of the Tristram Shandy one?
So you're talking about the Farner and Farn version and whether I had any implication on Tristram Shandy?
Yeah, because when I hadn't thought of it as having that similarity, but of course one is a physical digression and one is a visual.
Yeah. You know, this is interesting because actually one of the first books that I put on my truck was, even when I thought about perception of time, was the second encyclopedia of Toulon by Farner and Farner. Because I had gotten to know this encyclopedia when I work on my paper on the connection between the function of the book and physicality. And already back then, I knew that Farner were they were right with their realization in comparison to the other interpretation. But that's very interesting to think. You actually ask me whether I'm traveling in time and going back to examine Tristram Shandy after I open the envelopes and I do it now. No, really. Yeah, I mean, this is another thing to think. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So in the corner of the reading room.
I have one more question.
Oh yes.
Yes, Putzkalina.
Oh.
So this, touching upon the subject of digressions in memory and in time and history, you see a lot of times when people try to remember stuff, they're like, oh, I forgot, or they remember it badly. Well, do you think this is a digression when they're trying to return to that special place in time, but in the end they end up kind of joining and bundling up all these memories that might not have connections? Is that your linear perspective of life. If you were born in this one day and you were you went to school in this one place and then you graduated in this other place, you think, oh, did I graduate in that first place? When you're obviously older, but still, there's that sort of, don't you think there's that sort of digression in memory and that you can't remember stuff? Sorry.
This is my daughter. I think we are forced to remember things and experiences, and we are forced to remember our past in a linear way. But our brain is, I mean, think about the structure of our brain. Our brain, the connections and the interconnections are not built in a linear way, not at all. They are built as a network. They are built as a web of digressions. So I think our struggle, our daily basis, almost daily basis struggle not to digress is something that is dictated by the society.
Maybe linearity is the digression.
Yeah.
Okay, so there'll be opportunity for more discussion afterwards. I just was going to say, you have the corner of the reading room. There's a table that's devoted to Corcoran interns. This is where they sit when they come. They work together. This is what it's been like all semester. This kind of conversation. So you can imagine what this is doing to the reading room in terms of finding books that play into this conversation. It's really been quite fabulous. Let's give them a hand, please. And then a couple of things. There are books on the table. Everything that's been discussed, Dictionary Story, Book 91, The Humimint, Tristram Shandy, the Encyclopedia, Hypnerotomachia, Polyphily, they're all out on the table for you to look at. As you've always heard me say, there are too many of you to just pick up the book. We'll be happy to show you anything you'd like to see. Secondly, a reminder that next Thursday at 3 o'clock will be another lecture entitled
Individual Response, Collective Tragedy.
which will be looking at artist book responses to 9/11. And a couple of announcements. Would you like to announce your exhibition?
Oh, but it's not just artist books. It's an exhibition which includes artist books. It's Meret Oppenheim, the great surrealist who doesn't want to be identified as the author of Ferlantica.
Okay, thank you. And?
This Friday, another book history lecture at the Corcoran Gallery of Art, Museum, College of Art and Design for now. It's Ellen Gruber-Garvey, a wonderful scholar of especially 19th century print culture, supporting her new book from Oxford University Press, Writing with Scissors. It's about some of the stuff that Nama was talking about, actually, some kind of collective authorship. And that's 3:30 this Friday at the Corcoran. It's free, and you and all your friends are welcome to come.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for coming very much. Those of you in this aisle, before people start to come over, you can just move the chairs out of the way. They'll have more access to the table. Thanks, everybody.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.